Good morning. Welcome to the fifth investor event that has been taking place in the United States. At least we've done 4 or 5 of these now in London as well, and they've become a hallmark of our mission to provide for an opportunity for stakeholders in the industry to meet with the investor community. I'd like to start out by reminding, my name is Bob Preti, by the way. I'm chairman of ARM, at least until the end of this year. We've got a really packed agenda today, so I'm going to have about 10 minutes of opening remarks and then pass the baton on to Sarah Hecker, who's director of the technology section at ARM, and she'll begin with a very interesting fireside chat about the innovations occurring in the industry. I'd like to start by reminding the audience, reminding us all about the strategic priorities for the Alliance. The top 3 strategic priorities: 1, advocating for a clear and predictable harmonized regulatory and review pathway, harmonized to the extent we can around the world, is an extremely important priority for our organization. This year and we continue to focus on implementation of the 21st Century Cures Act, or at least we're celebrating that from last year, from December, getting the RMAT designation as part of that, and adding gene therapy into that, and providing for support and the sector interest in the PDUFA reauthorization discussions that are ongoing right now. The second priority is to enable market access for value-based favorable reimbursement policies. And we're working on new reimbursement models, and once again bringing stakeholders and payers together and engaging in discussions to facilitate actually getting these products paid for, which is important. Thirdly, to facilitate the sustainable access to capital, and as I mentioned earlier, this is our opportunity to raise the profile of public and private companies through engaging key investors, government agencies, and the stakeholders in the community. We are also focused on addressing industrialization and manufacturing initiatives and hurdles. The standards coordinating body is a particularly poignant activity at this point, which supports the development, communications, and the implementation of technical process development and manufacturing scalability standards for regenerative medicine and advanced therapies. And finally, we conduct key stakeholder outreach, communication, and education, the all-important education aspect of our mission. We continue to position ARM as a global go-to information resource for all key stakeholders, such as genome editing and the economic impact of regenerative medicine and advanced therapies, et cetera. A particular win this year was for patients, for ARM, and for the sector, was the passing of the 21st Century Cures Act. Michael Werner, Executive Director of the Alliance, is a key person to have driven this activity for and with us as an organization. Through ARM's leadership, we were able to ensure that regenerative medicine products get a more optimized approval pathway, and we were able to support the agency in its efforts to hold up standards for commercial approvals. And so to the extent these remain strong, this industry can remain strong. The global landscape continues to be a really growing and an interesting one for the regenerative medicine industry. There are now over 750 companies worldwide, and you can see most of these companies still remain in North America, mainly in the United States, but there's a really growing interest in Asia, with the Asian companies about half the size now, a little more than half the size of the European sector. And in terms of the clinical trials, there are 855 clinical trials right now ongoing. These numbers contain both industry and investigator-sponsored trials. You'll note that the pipeline is quite robust, and it continues to grow in all 3 phases, especially in phase 2 and phase 3. And key takeaway here is that phase 2 is significantly larger than phase 3, but many of those which indicates a growing of the sector, and it's pulling along coattails for phase 1 as well. But many of those phase 2 companies are in the approval pathway. These are pivotal trials and seeking accelerated approval. And so some of the lead companies in the space are actually in phase 2, and they'll leapfrog over phase 3 into commercial if all goes according to the plan. The pipeline is particularly rich in the oncology sector, cardiovascular disease, and neuroregenerative diseases. And what's important to note here is that a number of these categories also include trials focused on rare genetic disorders. What's coming down the road, what's really exciting, of course, is where we are from the history to where we are today, is we're at that point now where big products are about to get over the line, and we've learned from product launches in the past. We've learned what works, we've learned what doesn't work, and the companies that are out there now in the lead will be leveraging those lessons. And what's really important, and we'll focus on today a little bit, are the innovations that are happening in the sector. What's coming up next? It's really important, starting with the T cells and starting with our sort of basic cell therapy. We've moved into genetic manipulation of these cells, but now novel cell and gene delivery technologies and vehicles are beginning to take hold. Genome editing, as you've seen, is a real hot-button issue for the industry and provides for an entirely new future sector with tremendous promise. And on top of that now, and most lately, our sort of next-gen expression constructs. So there are some key regulatory milestones and data events that at the moment are driving the sector. This continues to be progress across the entire gene and cell therapy sector. The major events right now that we're all looking at are the CAR T events that are being shepherded in the lead by Kite and Novartis, who have now filed BLAs. And we'll talk a little bit more specifically about those in a moment. But there have been products approved in Japan, in the United States, and in Europe, all within the last year timeframe. So clearly momentum continues to be strong and is building. This slide talks about some of those specific events that are happening. As I just mentioned, Kite and Novartis being in the lead with these products, and of course Spark's product right with them as well. So we're anticipating a large number of these data events, of course, in 2017, and they will continue to drive momentum. The list that I just showed you is not meant to be extensive, but represents some of the major anticipated events. And what's happening is that's generating this continued activity in corporate partnering across technology types. There are significant dollar amounts, several with deal values in the billions, and several with really big upfront payments, which is very important. Many thought that the IPO window was essentially closed in 2016, and it was in a lot of tech sectors indeed. But we saw demand for companies in our sector, which is really positive news. The number of companies that were able to go public in 2016, a number of companies were able to go public in 2016 and raised dollars beyond their target values. "2016 was not as strong a year as 2015, but by all measures and in many parts, in many sectors, 2015 is sort of an outlier, not just in our sector. There's still a lot of money flowing into the sector in 2017. In the gene and cell therapy sectors, the amount raised in 2016 was just shy of half of that raised in 2015, but you can see by these numbers that in those sectors, we are actually seeing almost half the money raised in 2016 is already raised just in the first quarter of 2017. Within the different types of funding, M&A upfront payments in 2017 were quite strong, with numbers as high as $820 million. Sanpower Group that came in and took Dendreon from Valiant. Integra Life Sciences acquiring Derma Sciences for $204 million. Cytori acquiring assets from Azea Therapeutics for a $170 million deal with a $4 million upfront, and Hitachi Chemical taking the remaining 80.1% of my company, of PCT, in an $80 million deal with $75 million upfront. Follow-on financings in 2017 are strong. The Kite public offering for common stock for $410 million, and Editas, Regenix Bio, and Bellicum for numbers in the $70 to $90 million range. By a number of measures, 2016 was, as I mentioned before, the second best year after 2015. Examples of key deal with large upfront payments in 2016 and major IPOs include key corporate partnerships, Biogen and UPenn, Pfizer acquiring Bamboo, Adaptimmune, GSK, Bluebird and Medigene, Baxalta and Precision Biosciences, and Regeneron and Intellia to develop the CRISPR-Cas therapeutics. Examples of key IPOs in 2016 include Intellia, Editas, Axivis, Odentis, CRISPR, GenSight, and TiGenix, all raising significant dollars, between $35 million and $124 million. So I want to leave you with the thought that there's a lot of momentum in our sector, and with a lot of excitement about the future of these novel technologies and their potential to address unmet medical needs like never before. Thank you, and we hope you have a great day today.